I hear a lot of people say they need time to work on themselves. And often I will have potential couples call and say they want to do individual therapy first to work on themselves, and then eventually they might do couples therapy. Well, I get curious about things like this, and it kind of leads me to two questions. First, what is the work they are doing on themselves? And secondly, why do they think that work must be done alone or outside of a relationship? So I thought we'd dig a little bit deeper into those questions and try to find some answers around working on oneself and what that really means. Let's get started.
Welcome to Trauma Free Relationship, a podcast that provides support and guidance to help heal the wounds of attachment trauma. Whether you find yourself struggling with unresolved issues in the past or have experienced trauma in your current relationship, our goal is to provide accurate, scientifically informed information as well as the tools to help you create a secure connection between you and your partner. And here's your host, Tom Philp.
Okay, so in this episode, we're talking about what does the work on oneself actually mean? And insofar as the work goes, I think what most people are getting at is some kind of change in their behavior. Perhaps they've seen a pattern that they dislike or want to change. Perhaps they feel there's an underlying vulnerability that they want to heal. Or maybe they want to feel more confident in themselves in order to feel better in their relationship. And all of these things I just mentioned are worthy goals and outcomes. But I don't think it helps us explain what the actual work is that they're doing to get these outcomes. To me, the work actually comprises exchange and exchange in the form of feedback. Now, it's hard to change something you can't see, and all of us have blind spots. Moreover, I think it's only natural that we shy away, either in the form of compartmentalizing, disassociating, or even just defending our vulnerabilities. Those places that hurt, we tend to actually avoid and not actually go closer to in order to work on. So when we talk about work on healing past wounds, how do we do that without someone feeding back information to us in the way that it's impacting our lives and our relationships so that we can begin to see that ourselves? They say the first step in solving any problem is simply to acknowledge it. And so the most evident, I think, is when I point out people's defenses to them. It's hard to see our defenses because by the sheer fact of being defensive, we feel we're being justified in our thoughts and feelings. And so I see this a lot with my couples is when they are moving into their protection, and I will point this out and I will start at poke at what is the pain, the hurt, the wound, the insecurity behind that protection. And that is I think what I'm trying to explain here, which is we what is the work that we're doing if we naturally move into a place to protect those wounds? We don't often move head first into wanting to dive into that pain and inviting that into our life. And often, in fact, we don't even see that. Now, we might have gotten some feedback in our relationships about certain patterns of behavior, or hey, every time I bring this up, you get really defensive. So there may be times where certain people in our lives have invited us to look into ourselves and question why we might do what we do. But if we are naturally defensive to do that, then that blocks the whole process of working on ourselves. It kind of reminds me of the Johari window. Essentially, this is a four-box square. Imagine like when you were kids and you played hopscotch or you played square ball, right? You just have a big box and it has four squares in it. And the name actually comes from two psychologists, Joseph Luft and Harrington Ingram, that created this in 1955. Joseph, Harrington, Joe, Hari, they kind of just made a little play on the name there of this window. So if you could imagine, again, a box with 4 squares in it. Let's start at the top left box. Now, this top left box is things that are known to others and things that you know about yourself, right? So these are things that are transparent to you, and these are things that other people see about you. So if you're a gregarious, outgoing person, then you might know this about yourself, and others would concur. They would agree that yes, you are a gregarious, outgoing person. We see that in you as well. Now let's drop down to the box at the bottom left. Now, these things are things that are known to yourself, but may not be known to others. So maybe these are times where you feel insecure, but others can't detect that you feel insecure. Or things that you know, themes in your life about yourself, but others simply can't see. Now, if we move to the top right box, these are things that are not known to yourself that are known by others. So these are things that might be blind spots in ourself, patterns of behavior that others might be able to see, but maybe we're not always aware of either. One example comes to mind as I got some feedback years ago when I was working in the corporate world that when we were in meetings, oftentimes I would ask a question that had more or less already been answered. And part of that was because these meetings would run on so long, I would check out. And so I would miss some of the dialogue that was going on, and then I might pop up to say something, and then they would repeat basically what they've already said. Well, this was really great feedback to me, and I've carried that with me for a couple of decades now, that I can't allow myself to check out meetings because I know I will end up repeating myself or asking a question that's already been answered. So this was something that was known to others. They could see that I necessarily didn't see in myself until I got that feedback. And then finally, on the bottom right box, these are things that are unknown to us and things that are unknown to others. And so this oftentimes is the area that is most elusive, but oftentimes where the motives and intentions and the deeper feelings come from behind our patterns of behavior. And so this is just a helpful little box that I like to think of when we talk about when we're working on ourselves. What is the work we're doing? Are we working on things that we've gotten feedback on that people know about us that maybe we didn't know about ourselves? Is it things that are much deeper that we don't know about ourselves and others might not know? Or are we working on things that we know about ourselves that others might not see? And so, you can pick those sort of particular quadrants there if you want to, and consider what area you're working on. But I think essentially, if we're not targeting these areas that are not known to us, then we're missing essential pieces of information that actually help us grow and change. Our blind spots and our natural defenses actually push out of awareness those areas we need to work on the most. Sometimes those are things that are unknown to us and unknown to others. Sometimes those things are unknown to us but observable to others. One of the things that as marriage therapist and relationship therapist is sort of a saying in the field is if you want to know something about your partner, just ask your significant other because they have the greatest insight into who you are and can often feed back that information to you. Now, we don't want it to come back in the form of criticism or blame. It needs to come back truth and love. But nonetheless, nobody knows me better than my wife. Nobody can tell you better than my wife, my little picadillos, the little moments where I am less than glamorous and those moments that sort of drive her crazy that maybe others don't always see. But boy, she has a front row seat to those herself. So in my experience, the work that gets done when somebody is working on themselves, I think, is to think and reflect on themselves. But I also really feel that more than likely people end up distracting themselves until they feel the problem has either subsided or they feel better about themselves. So, to give an example of this, there's many times where couples will come to me and they will ask my advice as to whether they should take a break. And this is a great question. And I think it deserves a thoughtful answer. And so part of the reasoning is we seem to be caught in such rigid patterns of interacting with each other. Would it be helpful for us to take a break and have some time apart to quote unquote work on ourselves? And the answer I typically give to that is, well, I can't tell you whether to take a break or not. That's entirely up to you all. But if you're not dissolving the relationship, meaning if you're taking a break some time apart to work on yourselves, I applaud that. However, what are you doing fundamentally to work on the relationship? Because what I've seen over and over is that people that decide to take a break and work on themselves, that is oftentimes the first step to an easier way of dissolving the relationship. And whether both partners intended to be that or not, I have seen oftentimes that actually to be the outcome where the relationship ends. It just ends in a little bit softer, kinder way than, say, a more explosive way after a big fight. They're just kind of both the people are resigning to, well, this is hard, this is tough, and they're right, it is. I mean, they're absolutely right about that. It is hard, it is tough, it takes tremendous work to fight through it. And so what they've decided to do is just take a little break to ease the stress and the tension, but with no intentions of continuing to have a plan to work on the relationship itself. And so I think that can be healthy, and I've seen it work when the couple has a plan. So are they planning date nights? Are they continuing to come to therapy each week to continue to work on it? Do they continue to talk about and discuss their needs in the relationship? All these, to me, it seems fundamental to being able to continue to work on the relationship and also being able to work on themselves. And so that's again, I think that is a really important step in the relationship, in the life of the couple, to decide to take a break, and it needs to be very thoughtfully considered when doing so. And there's pros and cons to it either way, for sure. So I say all this to say, not as a criticism, but rather as a clinician who has observed this over and over again with various couples. And it seems to me, and I throw this out as a hypothesis, because I don't think I own the truth on this, but I wonder if there's not a better way of working on yourself that would be to put yourself in a position to be exposed to those hurts and fears in a safe environment so that you can actually not just work on them, but work through them. Meaning that they are, those hurts, wounds, and fears, they are less triggering for you. They trigger you less often. And the hurts and the fears associated with those wounds, they are not as painful when they get triggered. So something becomes becomes more of a memory of something in the past, as opposed to something that is viscerally relived in the moment when it gets triggered. And I say that because one of the things we know about triggers and trauma is that when you get triggered with your trauma, it is not a memory of something that's happened to you. It is a reliving of what has happened to you. It is as if something is still existing and you're reacting to the person or the event in the same way you might have reacted to the event from a long time ago that might have caused the hurt, the pain, or the trauma. And so it's something we relive. And this is where we get the whole idea of transference, how at times we might react to someone, in this particular case, our partner, as if they were someone in our past. And so we transfer those old wounds, feelings, thoughts, and behaviors onto our partner as if we were reliving what had occurred in the past. And so I wonder if there's not a better way for us to be able to work on ourselves by putting ourselves in a better position to get the feedback we need, and more importantly, maybe to get a similar experience, but in a much safer environment for us to be able to work through those issues. Um, One way to do this, obviously, is with couples therapy. I mean, that's partly why I do what I do, because I believe that the power that the relationship has where two people sit in a room with somebody who can create a sense of safety and security that can help them interpret and understand each other better, that can speak for them at times in ways that their partner can hear them and see them differently than what the cycle dictates. And they can move to a place of vulnerability where they can share that vulnerability together that allows them to deepen the bond and strengthen the bond with one another, to move from a place of insecurity to a place of security in the relationship. Obviously, that's why I do what I do, because I think that is so powerful. But I think there's other ways to do it. Groups are a wonderful way of getting feedback and exposure. So you could be an individual, but you could go to a group setting. And once you've sort of acclimated and built up trust with other group members, that is a fantastic way to start receiving feedback from other members about your thoughts, feelings, and behaviors in a relationship. And so I think that can be very impactful as well. So I think the point of all of this is we need to try to put ourselves into a position where we can utilize a relationship that allows us to actually work on ourselves. Otherwise, in my experience, what I have seen is that too often people simply actually avoid the work of the working on themselves. And in doing so, they actually sort of just avoid the repairing of any of those relationships, because so much of the repairing of relationships is the working on yourself to feel and think differently and to be able to respond differently to your partner. That to me comprises so much of the work when we say we are working on ourselves. I hope you found this episode enlightening, if not interesting, and a little bit maybe even entertaining. As always, feel free to give me some feedback. I'd love to take on some topics that you might be interested in hearing. And as always, thank you so much for listening. We'll talk to you next time.
Thank you for listening to Trauma Free Relationship, a podcast for the healing of attachment trauma. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, or our website at traumafreerelationship.com. Be sure to look for our next episode on your favorite streaming service.